we welcome you back. Measuring cross media platform usage is a difficult task, and data continues to be the most important asset to the industry. So, in this time of changing media touchpoints, how are we tracking viewers across media platforms? Are measurement techniques catching up with these changing conventions in the various media used? Therefore, are agencies able to leverage spends effectively across media without adequate data support? Finally, is there a future for syndicated data of cross media platforms? The answers to all these questions and more shall be unearthed in our next panel discussion, in which our esteemed guests would share their insights. Our moderator for the panel is Mr. Paratosh Joshi, currently the principal at Provocator Advisory. You've done that already. All right, cool. We also have with us Mr. Romil Ramgadia, Chief Business Officer at BRC India. Move on. We have with us Mr. Ankit Desai. Yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, and finally we have with us Mr. Mallikarjun Das, who is currently the CEO at Starcom Media West Group. He was previously associated with Tata Interactive Systems, Madison World, and Asian Paints. I would now like to invite all the guests on stage and Mr. Joshi to please take the panel ahead.
Good afternoon. This is something that has been a part of my sort of conference speaking life for the longest time. That I get to participate in the immediate post-lunch session. So I tend to be fairly soporific, but there are three other gentlemen over here who will hopefully keep you awake. But before we get to that, today there is a little somber moment which I want us to actually, I think, have Pradyuman Maheshwari in our thoughts today. Pradyuman was meant to be the panel moderator for the day, but he has, late last night, he was bereaved, he lost his father. So, he is a great supporter of academic institutions and your institution in particular. And his father was a formative influence in Pradyuman's life. And in the honor of Pradyuman's father, if I will ask all of you to please stand up and we'll observe a minute silence. Thank you. Okay. Pradyuman asked me to do this, so I'm doing it. Otherwise, we could have got straight into the conversation. Very short, fairly, sort of lean kind of a presentation about what this whole landscape of media measurement is all about. And you will see why I have called it what I have called it as we go through the 4 or 5 slides I had there. So why measure at all? What's the point of, come on, do something. Okay. So why do we need measurement in the first place? We've heard the word audience is used a lot today, but even before the audience is a content creator. So somebody writes something, somebody says or speaks something, somebody creates an audio visual of some description. And that person, the author of that content, needs to know who is actually consuming that content. So every writer wants to know, when we write essays, when we write something for our campus magazine, we want to know who is reading our stuff. When we have it published, we actually go around, when we write a blog, when we tweet, we hope that somebody acknowledges it, somebody recognizes what we have said. So every content creator needs to know, is keen to understand where that content has gone. Otherwise, it just goes blazing off into the unknown, and there is no feedback loop. So you need to have a feedback loop. Equally, just like this is important for those who create content, it's equally important for those who create commercial messages. So if I have a piece of advertisement, then I want to know, did it actually reach anybody? Did anybody actually interact with that advertisement? Did it influence their behavior in any manner? Did it change their perspectives in any manner? Without a shade of doubt, there is also a comparative or a competitive aspect to this. First with myself and then with other content creators. So I want to know time after time, because content creation or authoring of content is not a one-off process. If I'm an author, then I want to be an author again and again and again. So each time when I author, I want to know whether what I authored the previous time was doing better than what I did this time, or vice versa. So, and I want to know, because there are others, I'm not the only person who is speaking. There is a soapbox and people take turns at the soapbox. So how many people assembled around the soapbox when I spoke, and how many assembled around the soapbox when somebody else spoke? So there is a competitive aspect to that as well. And then it is not enough to know that the numbers went up or the numbers went down. There is also a need to be diagnostic. I need to know why it happened. So it's not enough to know that I have more people who are consuming my content or fewer people consuming my content. I'm curious to know, is there something that I can do to reinforce something which ensures that something that caused the audience to increase or become more engaged is strengthened, and something that causes the audience to go away or diminish in its engagement with me is removed from my style of communication. So what is the path that has been taken by media over the long haul to measurement? And the first question that would get asked was, how many people are consuming what I author? And I'm sure that if you go back to the caveman who drew in the caves of Altamira, a hunt, that caveman would have also been keen to know how many people actually came and looked at that painting of the stag and the hunt, and what she or he could do to make that painting more interesting and attractive for more people to want to see it. So every time a troubadour stood in a town square, the troubadour would know whether the story that he or she was telling was popular or not, because either it rustled up an audience or it did not. Here in Maharashtra, we've had a tradition of the Kirtankars who went from temple to temple. And in every part of the country, we have these traditional folk artists who pretty much with a duffly would stand somewhere and start telling a story. And either they had a reputation for telling great stories and they drew great audiences, or people were ignoring them. So everybody was keen to understand how many. And this was true in the media. And therefore, the first measurements which began, and the first place that it got measured was obviously the first medium there was, which was the newspaper, started with measuring not how many people were reading, but how many copies were being sold. And this process was called the process of audit. And I think on a previous occasion, I talked about audit bureaus of circulation to you guys, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but that was the first process of measurement, which was how many copies got sold. Then the question started getting asked, who were these people who were actually consuming the content that was being sent out? So audience research started after publication research started. Audit bureaus were publication research, readership studies were audience research. And readership studies and indeed television viewership studies have been with us now for more than 60 years. The BBC started its first exercise to figure out what was going on with television audiences when there were all of 5,000 television sets in the city of London. This was before the Second World War, so we are talking about 1936 now. And one sort of researcher, market researcher in BBC, felt the need to actually create what we now know of as the day after recall process, right? And he actually came up with the idea of diaries. And this was at the time when there were all of 4,000 TV sets in all of England. Then the next question, after you ask the question about what this audience was composed of, the next question was, why was the audience at all, right? And this actually becomes an enduring question, that it's not enough to know who constitutes my audience, but why is my audience constituted in the way that it is? Because the only way that I can author content sensibly, which actually targets in the right place. I mean, one of you, your groups did this presentation about the virality of content. And an important question that that presentation asked was, how do I actually create author content which has the potential of being viral? So this question, this why question, is a very important question that comes sequentially. Then there is the last question, and which also has been talked about in the previous panel and indeed in some of your presentations, which is that as a consumer of content, content is not the only thing I consume, and content through one medium is definitely not what I consume. So I consume across multiple media, across multiple devices and screens and substrates. So while a digital screen is a substrate, paper is also a substrate. So there are many substrata that I use, and I also consume other things. So I consume Uber rides, and I consume candy, and I consume flights, and I consume furniture and bottled water and what have you. So the need to understand behaviors encompasses or sort of grows and expands to understand the whole complex set of consumptions that constitutes the life of a person. Now, how have we gone? How did we travel this path? It began with studies that were conducted by authors for themselves. So let's say a newspaper owner in the UK, say the Times of London, may have said that I need to sell advertising, and here is an audit conducted by my accountancy firm that tells you that these were the number of copies I sold in London, in Leeds, in Kent, in Sussex, in Surrey, in Sussex, in whatever else. And so therefore you can advertise with me. Then if 3 or 4 publications were all giving out their own audits, after some time it would become difficult for an advertiser to determine whether those audits were authentic or not. So people got together and said that let's get together and do this agnostic to the commissioning entity. So I should not have the accountant obligated to me or the auditor obligated to me at the time when the audit is conducted, so that there is actually a way by which that audit can be conducted above board, so there is integrity in that audit. So the audit bureaus were formed because multiple audit companies were being sought out by publications. Then the publication said, no, we need to be able to monitor each other, so let's join hands. And the audit bureaus of circulation are actually, even in many countries, including in this country, the progenitors of the readership research. So the readership studies in India came out of the audit bureaus. So proprietary research gave way to syndicated studies. Finally, syndicated processes actually have made way for what is called joint industry committees, and when they get structured into corporate entities, they're called joint industry bodies. So these joint industry committees or joint industry bodies actually bring in all the stakeholders who are involved in a particular value chain, and thereby create an even more robust structure, because in a sense the people who conduct the research and the people who commission the research are now separated. So the JIC commissions the research and vendors conduct the research. In a syndicated model, the vendor in a sense is he owns the research and distributes the research. So in India, to give you a recent example, TAM was a syndicated study, whereas say an MRUC or a BARC is a JIB. They are both joint industry bodies, and they commission research agencies to do work for them. So they own the research, but somebody else actually does the field work. So the design, The standards, the quality management is in the hands of the JIB, and the actual operational conduct of the research is done by some vendor. Right. How do you actually evaluate a measurement system? How do you know that a measurement system is good or bad or indifferent? And the first thing to look for is fidelity, right? Fidelity is this, that if I was to measure your pulse, right? This is the radial pulse, the radial bone. I would get a number, and it would be based on looking at a stopwatch or at the second hand on a clock or on your mobile phone, and counting for 60 seconds and figuring out how many beats of the pulse I detected. Now, my fingers may not have high fidelity. They may not be able to actually catch every beat because some beats will be stronger than others. So if I put a cuff on this, right, and if I took a measurement based on the cuff, I'm likely getting a better reading. This is fidelity. So how close is a measurement to the actual underlying phenomenon that is being measured? And is it able to do this consistently? Because it may happen that, I can do the radial pulse with my fingers and maybe get a good reading the first time, but maybe the second or the third time I may not. Whereas a cuff will deliver fidelity time after time after time. So the ability to exactly mirror the underlying reality, that's fidelity. The second one is that the ethical processes that surround the measurement system must be such that they are not subject to tampering, they are not subject to being corrupted in any manner, for example, if you run a panel for something, that the panel cannot be infiltrated by vested interests, that's integrity. And really long-term trust in a measurement system is a product of fidelity and integrity. So you need to be able to deliver results with fidelity, and you need to do it in a context which cannot be corrupted. There is a third aspect though, which is accountability. So you deliver trust, and then you must also deliver accountability, which is that you are willing to stand up for whatever you say, and you are willing to be transparent about the manner in which you go about doing things, and that people can come and in fact examine you and know that you are maintaining those standards of ethics. So a good measurement system will have fidelity, will have integrity, and will have accountability. Now, when you guys were doing the presentations, all of you paid attention to the first aspect. All of you paid attention to fidelity, and that's a good thing, because it is the most important thing. You need to get fidelity right in the first place. But as you start actually getting in the process of being parts of measurement systems, you will realize that it is the next two which actually matter at least as much as fidelity. So you can have fidelity over the long haul, and you will still get caught out because you did not deliver on integrity, or because you did not have enough accountability. Okay, finally, where does this go from here? This is where we are now. One of the things which keeps coming up is a notion that I can now measure every individual behavior no matter where it happens, so that I don't actually need a statistical sample. I can in fact conduct a census every single time. This is, it's a very attractive, if sort of self-defeating kind of a objective. The problem with attempting censuses of everything at all times and hoping that you will get a census record of everything is ultimately you have to have actionable information, right? And while there might be some situations in which you can do sort of almost endlessly mass customizing of a message, the reality is that you have a finite number of messages that you can actually put out, or you need to put out. It's not that you need to tailor each individual message around each individual person in the audience. So it does help. It is very, very handy to actually find ways by which you can classify audiences. Not only that, in any case, as a marketeer of a good or a service, you have priorities. Not everybody is an equiprobable consumer. There is no equiprobability. The moment you make once you made a choice about what you want to sell, or what you want to deliver as an author of content, equiprobability has already gone out of the window. So immediately there are certain audiences that you need to understand better than others. So the census becomes a self-defeating exercise because you're wasting too much effort to get at a quantity of information which is only a subset of the giant superset provided by the census. We've typically, and I started with that thing called tally marks because that was the way that was the amount of data processing we had available. We had to actually count up people and make 4 marks vertical and then one which went struck through. Now, I don't think there is anybody except Indrani in the room who's actually ever used tally marks in their life, right? So, and her and me, I mean, we are of a generation. So the two of us know what tally marks are, the rest of you have never seen them. But we actually did them. Another thing that is completely archaic, we used to physically draw histograms on graph paper. I don't know if you guys have ever seen graph paper, right? Oh, you have? Wow, that's cool. I'm glad. I also know now that you're also awake and wanting to listen to what graph paper is used for. This is interesting. So cross-sectional studies are studies at a moment in time. Longitudinal studies are studies that go across a longitude being a life, right? So when you study to the horizon, that's a longitudinal study. When you study vertically, that's a cross-sectional study. We've always done cross-sectional studies and we obsess over them. So every week, Malli gets an opportunity to beat up on Romil because the numbers that he got for that week for a particular show that he had bought or not bought were not good or much better than what he thought they would be. After Ankit has done it. It's sequential. There's a longitudinal thing happening to the cross section. So the thing is that now there is a possibility to actually aggregate larger amounts of data. That's where this sample versus census makes more sense. It's not about worrying over doing a census each time, but being able to deal with a larger quantity of data and be able to process it sensibly, right? And now you can actually think in terms of how do people behave across a period of time, because to really get an understanding of what's going on over there, what are the underlying phenomena at play, you need to understand longitudinally. For the purposes of simplicity, we reduced market research to these segments, whether we call them socioeconomic classifications or other consumer classifications or income classifications or whatever else. All of these were ways of attempts at simplifying a classificatory system, a taxonomic system. The reality is that consumers don't really behave according, to their, shall we say, age, gender, and socioeconomic class. All of you are wearing clothes that I would be presumably wearing on a moment like this, and I'm wearing green colored trousers. Inexplicable, but and somebody would say that I'm being completely juvenile in the way that I have dressed for the day. But then, I used to wear jackets the first few times when I came here, and I said there are too many jackets in the room already. Why do I add one more? So you can call me juvenile, or you can just say that he's one more guy who uses denims, and chinos. So behaviors are actually better understood. For example, there is a cyclist on the stage, and there's another cyclist who's broken his wrist. The cyclist who's broken his wrist is of my age group. This cyclist is of a much younger generation, but they are cyclists. And at that level, they would bond much closer, and for very many good reasons, than being two people in the media industry, I think. Because it's far more interesting to talk about bicycling in the first place. Plus, he's in Leh one day, Goa one day, and Kerala the third. So there is many more stories to tell than about the boring details of a media plan. Now, cohorts are what forms around interests and around belief systems. And so there is a cohort, for instance, right now, around the virtues of Santhara, and there is another cohort around the ills of Santhara as a practice. And you can belong to either without necessarily being of any age or any gender or any socioeconomic class. It's a point of view. And cohorts explain a whole lot about many, many types of behavior, but defining cohorts and being able to actually capture them is not easy. But that looks like a future direction. And finally, I spoke about longitudinals a little earlier. Longitudinals also cue one more thing, which is that We don't want to now understand a person in terms of, monadic behaviors associated with one substrate. Because that monadic behavior with one substrate does not explain anything. People surround themselves with multiple substrates and multiple devices and screens, and you can only understand them as a composite of all of those devices and screens and forms of consumption. But today, for reasons of convenience, we've chosen historically to do monadic studies. But the future doesn't look like it's monadic. The future looks like it's going to be around all the possible touch points that people engage with. So that's really the background, and this pretty much shuts me up. The rest of the conversation is going to happen with the gentleman over there. So thank you for being patient, but the real action begins now. Yeah, okay. And since Ankit, you have in a sense led already by telling me they all ultimately point fingers at you, so let's start with you. Yeah, you're also sitting in the center, have you noticed? There must have been a reason. Okay, everything, yeah, it's stacked. Okay, so let's start with you immediately. As somebody who is involved with making decisions on what goes on with the media in your enterprise, are you satisfied, somewhat satisfied, or dissatisfied with the state of measurement and the quality of measurement that's available to you at this time?
So I think that's a fairly easy question. I don't think anyone can be completely satisfied with any measurement that one has. So one learns to live with what one has, and one learns to use it the best that one can. Can it get better? Yes, it can get better. Are there pros and cons? Yes, there are. Are there issues against making it better? Yes, there are. So I'm saying it's always, it's a perennial question of improvement, and there's never a good enough gold standard that one can achieve in terms of measurement. But having said that, are we in a better place than we were a couple of years back? I think we are in a better place, getting better, and you actually have sight on the fact that it's getting better. So from that point of view, I think I'm happy about the fact that we've actually made progress as an industry, and we've been able to build consensus on making progress. So I see that as the positive rather than the end point.
By the way, one of the things that I want to say right ahead, okay, is that there is no question time. You are all a part of this room, yeah? There is no glass wall here, and there is no glass ceiling between us. So if you have a thought or a question or a point of view, feel free to put your hand up, yeah? And we will get you right into the conversation. Malli, you've been a sort of participant in many ways, a contributor in so many different forums. Ankit seems to have a very tentative sense of positivity about where we are going. You've been even more proximate. What is your assessment?
Okay, let me just reframe that a little bit and say that yes, I think we are still not using the data that we have adequately. I mean, do we have great data? The answer is obviously no. I think we still have distance to go. But is the industry using the data that it has adequately? I don't think so, because I think somewhere down the line, media has got into, I would say, three forms of biases. One is, I would say, cognitive biases. There are tremendous cognitive biases of decision making. I mean, things like the confirmation bias. I mean, simply put, a man with a hammer will go looking for a nail. So, if I already believe, let's say, that cricket works, then you as an agency can come and tell me anything, but I will find the data that proves my hypothesis. So the confirmation bias exists to a tremendous extent in the media industry.
Which kills objectivity.
Yeah. The second thing I would say which exists is essentially heuristics, which is gut feel. I mean, a technical term for gut feel. One thing which I very commonly throw it at people when they throw things at me is the PLU heuristic, as I call it, which is people like us.
Correct.
right? So everybody watches Monk because see, we are all living in Bombay and we think that people in our class of society watch Monk. But then we tend to have this frequency illusion that the whole world is watching that particular program. I don't have anything against that program, okay? I'm just taking that as an example. And then we go and then decide to put big monies behind it. We very easily rationalize the decision making on it. I mean, when you're in a decision making process, a decision to put a fairly large amount of money can be undertaken in a matter of minutes, and that's sometimes a very frightening thing actually when you go back and realize what actually happened. And the third one is logical fallacies, just pure errors of doing A to B to C, the connecting the dots. I mean, there are issues. I would say more than the data, the problem somewhere has happened that the industry has not used the data that is it has it in its hand adequately enough, and probably 40 to 50% of decision making is swimming in these waters.
There was some interesting confirmation biases going on even with this audience in front of us. So they had something called pretentious movie reviews, which all of them watch. I know because the last time when I talked to this lot, I actually spoke about pretentious movie reviews. The thing is that PLUs don't know what pretentious movie reviews are, but they immediately confirmed the pretentious movie reviews because all of them watch it. So by the way, guys, you are not immune to these things. Everything that Malli says is as applicable to people in this audience as it is to old flatulents like us. So the young people do the same thing. But the point that you're making, I think it's keener than that, which is that somewhere along the line, we as a measurement system or measurement community have failed to explain, and this brings me to you, Romil, failed to explain the manner in which numbers and statistics actually work. So oh, good Lord. Thank you very much, sir. You know what got him here? The cyclist in the room. The cohort is now complete. So Romil, we have also failed to explain the way that statistics work.
So, yes, I agree, Paritosh, in terms of, I think, what has happened over the last, since almost 15 plus years of really people meter based television audience measurement system working in India, and now we have embarked on a different journey. But if you, and when we go out in the market and speak to the agency people or the advertisers, even the broadcasters, at the end of it, they actually are doing a day job. So unfortunately, they don't know if the TRP is 1 or 0.1 or 0.2, what it actually means. The statistics behind it, unfortunately, is something which is not understood by most of them actually, because at times when someone really asks us that hey, last week actually in Bangalore for female 15 to 21 NCCSA, there was, my rating was actually 1, this time it's 0. So, the real answer is there was one woman who was watching that, and this week she's visiting her parents in Mysore. So, you might as well get that rating as 0. So, that's unfortunate kind of ask, or that kind of unfortunate kind of expectation which has got built from the measurement system, because world over actually, and we have actually consulted a lot of people, and we are consulting a lot of people from outside the country. The amount of cuts that we are used to as an industry, the amount of dissection that we do as an industry, no matter what the amount of sample size is, you will not be able to fulfill it. So I'm saying that you need to look at, as Paritosh rightly mentioned, in terms of from a longitudinal analysis, you probably have to look data more holistically as a direction rather than as a point of time. Unless we start doing that, unless we start having a broader sense on what it actually is meant to be, we'll never be able to use it objectively. As a JIC, as a joint industry body, actually, we are trying to put this concept of objectivity into the data, put this concept of statistics into the data, that it is statistically not relevant. So that's why actually we have actually put a number in the system that, hey, below 200 sample size, you will not see the data. So if you want to see the data, and if you want us to make it available, it's statistically not valid. So don't force us to make it available, because it's not really data which will make sense. And you will make decisions based crores and crores of rupees, and you will spend that kind of money and then come back to us saying that, you have never reached that audience. So it has to make sense.
Ankit, I know that the advertiser community becomes the favorite whipping boy of all of these things, but I put this to you, that when you make a brand decision, when you make a brand launch decision, so you've decided that you will support Parachute aromatherapy as a category in the future. Now, you wouldn't read the success or failure of Parachute aromatherapy on the basis of a week's results in one city. We keep hearing that the client wants this, that the client wants to know this performance of what happened to that NCCSA woman in Bangalore between 16 and 17 and a half. Is this really sort of, what you are seeking? Does this help you in any manner? Or is it just the way that sort of some perversity in the system has caused it to happen, and that's not really what your point of view is?
So I think it's a mixed bag. I think you're right. We don't look at a 1 week performance to decide the future of our brands, the performance of our brands in market. But what we do look at is performance of campaigns and awareness build up, and I say build up over a period of time. Yeah. So from that point of view, I kind of slightly disagree with Roman. So you might have a point of view as a research body saying, I don't want you to slice data and look at very narrow TGs. But as a brand, if my brand is reaching out to a very sharp TG, and if I'm not able to measure it, then I start questioning what's the purpose of actually using this data. Yeah, is it so that I get a sense that there are some numbers and I'm getting spillover on a disproportionately large audience, and somewhere within that there is a core that I will reach out to, or am I making my investments work hard by getting them to work sharp? And that's perennially, I think, the problem and the fine line that one is always trying to walk, and unsuccessfully in most cases, because as he said, there's this conundrum of how much do I invest, and at what point do I say that this TG is too sharp? Yeah. So, like you said, we're the favorite whipping boys, but it's not madness without a method. Finally, there is a reason why we are asking the question, and if the brand is broad-based, then I probably won't ask that question. But if it is sharp and fine, I would want to know.
So, if I may, so in
Yeah.
terms of, as a joint industry body, we deal with a finite resource, right? So we have those 22,000 homes to be deployed as far as meters are concerned. So it's not that we deal with infinite resource, and if someone wants a measurement body to measure as acute target audience that they want, we'll be happy to do it, but somebody has to fund for it. And in terms of, as an industry, are we willing to fund for that kind of acute measurement? Not at this stage. In terms of, probably we have a much larger thing to tackle right now, rather than that a particular brand. In terms of, so if you as we have started, in terms of, hopefully by the end of this month we'll start with the rural measurement as well, which will be first in the country, right? So in terms of first time the country will see it. So from that standpoint, we have lot more bigger challenges to handle at the moment as far as TV audience measurement space is concerned, than actually right now, to my mind, to focus on these aspects is my perspective, Ankit. So in terms of, you can do it, why can't you do it? I'm just saying it's something which is not a rocket science. You just have to sample it incrementally and you can do it. So,
in fact, I'll put this to you, Malli. The other thing which seems to also be going missing, and you said this in the beginning, we don't use all the data we have, and we overuse what we do have, So on the one hand, there is an embarrassment of riches which we have not at all sort of mind. On the other hand, we make over much of what came this last week. And one thought which comes to my mind is, and let me take an analogy from somewhere else, right? So if I am say, an algorithmic trader, if I need to set up an algorithm, right? What am I going to do? I will set up the algorithm and backtest it using 20 years of NSE data, right? And I will know by backtesting it that on that huge volume, it works well. And what I'm now therefore doing is that I'm building that algorithm on the basis of a really large data set, and therefore I am reducing the relative error in that. Why is it that, where does our analytics come up short, where ultimately it becomes this thing of, slice it to that little thing and tell me?
Yeah, I think it's basically going back to the media planning process. Okay, I mean, and I'll put this down as, okay, there's a conflict, like what do you put in that? There's a conflict between the mental model and the mathematical model. I mean, this is the fundamental conflict that we as I as a media planner face every day in my life. Now, actually, you come to think of it, the truth is that the media plan has to be algorithmic, and the reason I say that is, let's take television, okay, 400 channels. If I had to make a monthly plan for a brand, let us say Parachute hair oil, it'll have about 10,000 spots. And if I had to actually make a television plan on the principles of incremental reach, which means, okay, let's say I take the first spot on the basis of the lowest cost, and then the next spot that I add should be strictly on the basis of its ability to add incremental reach, and I so on and so forth, iterate. With the current level of hardware and RAM and everything else, I did a basic back of the envelope calculation that it will take me 2,800 years to do this plan. Okay, I mean, and this is fairly accurate. Okay, so obviously then the plan that the client is today getting is suboptimal to the core, because what the planner has done, and what the planner has done is not wrong. I'm not blaming the planner, because the planner is sitting in front of his machine. He has a deliverable which is day after tomorrow, so he has to take broad swaths of the data, and he takes a rapier and he cuts it in 4 to 5 gross cuts, and then makes a plan, which includes things like spotting levels. So there are many theories which come every day in a news channel. I mean, I actually ask a planner, I need 20 spots a day in Aaj Tak. I mean, why do you need? What is this new theory, I ask? No, but spotting levels. But what is spotting levels? Who told you spotting levels? Oh, my boss told me spotting levels. So then you actually deconstruct it and go down to the root cause of why a new theory like spotting levels per day has come about. It's because I have to find a simple way of doing a plan. Now, leave TV aside. I think we've discussed a lot about TV. Maybe you just come down to print. No, when was the last time any of us saw a print optimizer driven plan, for instance? I mean, I haven't seen it. I mean, because then the people just say, okay, take the top publication, in a market. But is it necessary to take the top publication in every market?
We haven't given you readership for ages, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean,
Everything is kite flying.
Yeah, everything is kite flying. So therefore, the problem is that given skepticism around data, which has crept into the decision maker's mindset, the unfortunate reality, and this is not a completely accurate number, but I mean, from whatever estimate that I've done, out of the 36,000 crore media industry that we are all in, my guesstimate is that about 55% to 60% of that spending is driven by gut heuristics, blah blah. Not all of it is wrong, mind you. I don't want people who are inclined towards the artistic side of life to take a knife and come after me. But I'm saying that the thing is that given the complexity that I've put down, which is the TV plan's job, it is tough. But let's just go back, to digital on the other hand. I mean, the same people, the same agencies, which do not mind going the art route on television plan, are talking about nuclear level physics as far as digital is concerned. The first thing they utter is programmatic, which is nothing but optimization of digital, simplistically put. So if people are willing to optimize for what is 1% or lesser of the budget today, why are they not doing that for 85%? I mean, that I think is the fundamental conundrum. I mean, unless we get out of this skepticism of data, we understand that yes, data has limitations. Obviously, there is no measurement without error. I mean, all of us did science at some point of time in our lives. I mean, which aspect of science did ever tell us that there is any measurement without any error? Every measurement has to have error. It's our tolerance to it that's what matters. Right?
As a matter of fact, if we remember Heisenberg, then it tells us the moment you measure something, it changes it. So you already have that problem. I'm going to go back to you, Ankit. The problem with data is that when you torture it enough, it will say what you want it to say. And are you, in effect, by asking for those small slices, I'll tell you why I'm contesting it a little bit. It goes back to something which I was talking about in the presentation, that your brand manager is defining the audience in terms of a demographic or something like that, right? But your own actual experiential understanding of the brand is telling you that that's not the way that brand consumption is behaving. Brand consumption is behaving around cohorts which are not that easy to capture in conventional, boundaries of demographics. So why the sort of this over enthusiasm? I mean, the brand manager in many cases is an immature child, and you need to be able to tell the immature child that, listen, this is nonsensical. Grow up.
No, so you're not completely off, right? So there is a communication TG, there is a user TG, and we know the two don't always talk. However, the fact remains that there is a fulcrum that is moving the brand. And while your user TG might have various dimensions, your cohort as you call it, in the absence of research around cohorts, and we don't get to see those cohorts in action, yeah, we are currently dependent on a lot of demographic data. Now, to say that you want to stop looking at that demographic data, or generalize it and make it a larger swath, makes it a little difficult for someone who has to make a volumetric projection as a forecast for the next 6 months. Yeah. So somewhere I think one has to balance. Yeah? And I'm not saying that every brand needs to go completely sharp and fine, and define a very sharp TG, which makes it extremely difficult to deliver in terms of measurement. But there will be times, and there are times when one needs to go down that road. Now, one can, and Romil, it's not that one is asking you to build for each one of those TGs, right? There is a roadmap, and we've been talking, right? Even on the BARC journey, we take those calls as we go along. But one has to remain cognizant of the fact that there are brands which have these at their epicenter. And one has to remain sensitive to the fact that business does run that way. Yeah. So if we are looking at media data and the need to generalize on media data, there is also the reality of business data and the need to look at these TGs because they form a veritable fulcrum for some brands.
I have a point on that actually. Let's say that a brand really needs a particular niche cut, for instance, like what you're saying, then I think the more important discussion, and that I think is as much true for television as it is for print and anything else, is what is the measurement error that we are willing to tolerate? I mean, I think that has to be put on the table because your samples and cost of research is totally linked to our tolerance of measurement error. I mean, if I want to measure the incidence of let's say common cold in Pune, I need a very small sample because it's a fairly occurrent disease, so I probably need a sample of 100 people. But if I have to measure sarcoidosis of the liver, which is niche channel phenomena, let's say that SEC-A1 then I need maybe a sample of 20,000 plus to even find that particular thing. So then we need to, I think as a community, I think that's the level of debate which probably not happened. I mean, we need to have that thing saying, okay, this is what we in measurement we are willing to tolerate this level of error. Below this, any level higher than this, then we won't. I mean, that will not be reported, and anything below, yeah, we will live with it.
I think one of the key failures that we've had as a body, as an industry, is the fact that we haven't talked about data being directional for business. A lot of times we tend to use it as an absolute measure, and there begins the issue. What you're talking about tolerance, about relative error, I think we need to talk a lot more about it within ourselves so that people get used to the idea. I think once that happens, everything else will flow into place.
And Romil, one of the things that BARC is trying to do is to actually introduce ideas like relative error into the conversation. How is that working?
That's right. So, and actually, as just to take on what Ankit said, in terms of, I think with BARC coming into shape, I think this industry participation and dialogue has opened up much more sharply than probably it was before. And I think which is a welcome move in terms of there are these balances that need to be maintained being at BARC. But yes, I think that's moving in the right direction. So there are some things which are missing. There are some things which are in the pipeline, in the roadmap, and will you achieve all of it? Someone along the way, some maybe not. But so as far as and this concept of statistical reliability, this concept of relative errors, this concept of the incidence level, at least now people are familiar with these. People are much more familiar than they were. People are actually wanting to hear it from us, and people are actually now looking to, there have been requests from us. There have been requests to us saying that if you are reporting a rating, also report the relative error for that. So I'm saying when you receive these requests, then it's heartening to know that actually people are moving in that direction. So from that standpoint, the concept is still nascent, but it's growing.
Can I ask a question of the audience while we are at it? What is relative error of a measurement? Anybody volunteering? If we measure something, say we measure a readership of a publication, and I told you that the publication had a readership of 100 in Lavale, and I asked you what might the relative error be, what would relative error mean to you? Yeah, go for it.
It's a comparison with some other data that we have taken.
No, it's not. Okay, you guys are familiar with the idea of standard deviation? Yes. Alright, so the rating or the readership is always the measure of central tendency. That's the mean, right? The mean score gives you that measure. However, the problem is that because it's a product of a sample and not of a census, therefore there is a natural error built into the statistical measurement. So, as you probably know, if things are distributed according to the standard normal distribution or the normal distribution, then there is such a thing as a standard deviation, and 3 standard deviations on either side of the mean will account for how many percent of the... Absolutely, right? So the relative error is nothing but the standard deviation divided by the mean. So how many times the mean is the standard deviation? So if you say that the relative error, the absolute error for this 100 might be 10, so the relative error is 10% or 0.1. So it's useful to know this, because otherwise this whole conversation becomes junk to you. Mali, I'm coming back to you and I'm picking up something that Ankit said. As agencies, you are going to be doing plenty of analysis, pre and post plans. And he mentioned volumetric projections. Now, so there is obviously explanatory modeling and there's predictive modeling. What do you do more of?
This is with respect to
Client work. So is it actually volumetric work that you do? Do you track shares? Do you track absolute volumes? Do you do backward? Do you do...
Actually, I think most of the work would essentially be predictive. I mean, in the sense that, I mean,
So
even
why don't we then go back?
Yeah, I was coming to that. Yeah. So yeah, it is largely predictive because that's the day job, right? I mean, because even my media plan is a predictive exercise, because on the basis of the recent past, I'm predicting the future. So I think, I mean, agencies fundamentally engage in predictive modeling. Yeah, volumetrics happen at the annual planning stage. I mean, or the yearly reviews and the annual plans is when one gets down into a bit of an examination of, are we doing the right thing? I mean, is this the target audience? Given the business priorities and the challenges that we face, what should we be doing and so on? I mean, those are the existential dilemma days. I mean, and that's when we really do the volumetrics and whatever. Yeah.
But doesn't actually the explanatory modeling have far more insight in it than doing these correlates on the next 3 months?
Yeah, but I think, see, television, I mean, or even print planning, I mean, I'm saying media planning overall, I mean, is more important. I mean, I would actually argue the other way around, because, yes, you know, it's basically like finding out what is the meaning of life and going and earning my next day's bread, right? I mean, so there is the meaning of life question that we address. But having addressed that, we still need to go and do our day, go and, you know, keep the machinery churning and make sure we are optimizing it and make sure we are making those small nuances which are necessary. I mean, obviously, separating the signal from the noise and making sure we are taking the right calls. And that's where I think that data flow, I mean, measurement, I mean, and you mentioned about 2 kinds of data. That's where I think continuous data comes into play in a media planner's life, because we know that there are small changes, you know, in behavior which happen in media consumption behavior, and a media planner's fundamental job is to therefore, you know, explain those variations and make sure he or she is using those variations to, you know, the client's advantage.
Romel, we make one sort of implicit assumption whenever we put out any media measurement, which is, and which everybody assumes, everybody who uses it, is that we have a damned fine understanding of the underlying population that we are representing. Is that premise in fact true, or does that need to be fixed by itself?
So so as I said, so that premise is true to the extent that it's also a statistical exercise and fraught with its own errors, except that you use census measurement for something, etc. But then you end up going back to conducting an own establishment study, which is fairly large, and which kind of gives you the base for predicting what the population is, predicting what the TV universe is, or predicting what the NCCS, etc. is year on year, and you kind of revisit your sampling, you kind of redeploy or recast your sampling every year basis that establishment study that you're supposed to do every year as a measurement body. So we at BARC have undertaken that exercise for the first time. We have relied on IRS 2013 for launching, but now we are starting our own establishment study, which will give us much more accurate. And the need of the hour is to make it a rolling study, because it has to be a rolling study because the dynamics of the consumption is changing so fast. And as we said, so TV might become a second screen soon. So the dynamics of the change is so fast that unless and until you are doing a rolling quarterly or half yearly study and being on the ball, it will be difficult for you to actually give robust measurement data.
Yeah.
Just a point of view on that, what Romil also said. So one is, I think, yeah, I mean, first of all, I think as far as the population is concerned, in my mind, first for a measurement, I think there is a wrong question. The wrong question is, in the TAM days, they used to ask us, probably in the BARC days also, they might, which is that India is a country with, a 1.2 billion population. How is 22,000 meters or 30,000 meters going to be adequate? I mean, it seems like a drop in the ocean. But I think if I just go back to statistics and sampling theory, the size of the population has got absolutely nothing to do with the size of the sample. I mean, the two are absolutely separate. And the reason I'm saying this is a question which will get thrown in every cocktail party and every conversation, and every TV producer's biggest grouse is that my creative instinct tells me this is worked and that stupid system is not telling the truth, So I think that's the first point. But I think, to my mind, where the population gets interesting, and I think that's where I think measurement can play a role, is because as consumers, we are getting more and more complex, and things are getting more and more nuanced. So if things, and that's probably going back to what young Ankit raised, which is that, today, if I want to know if I want to target the iPhone user or the 50,000 plus kind of a strata, today no data set, for instance, gives me a nuanced understanding of the top end of the pyramid is something that we miss. I think that's a lacuna that we've been having for the longest periods of time. And I think while we are all talking about the bottom of the pyramid and etc., we actually look at market data today. I think India is actually going through a more premiumization than BOP kind of dynamics. I mean, if you go down to the Nielsen data and look at it, most FMCG marketers are growing more with their premium products, which therefore brings to the question as to, therefore, should our measurement, which is A, B, C, D, E, get even further nuanced, because that seems to be the need of the hour for business.
Okay. So, I hope you understood the point about the establishment study, because, everybody looks at the data which ride on top of the establishment study. So ratings right on top and things like that right on top. But the underlying study is a study of trying to determine the household behavior itself. And that's the 300,000 home study that Romil was talking about. Ankit, one of the possible apprehensions, does it worry you or not, is the question, that could happen is that, now BARC will do an establishment study, and therefore BARC will come out with a segmentation, right? And tomorrow it's possible that IRS might do IRS all over again. One of these days it might wake up, and then there might be an IRS, and then IRS will produce some data all its own. And so then you're going to have two different taxonomies for the same population. What will you do?
That's a difficult question, Bharatosh. So I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't think we've thought about it enough. But right now, if I look at the state of the environment, I think 85% of my money is with BARC. Yeah. So that kind of answers your question.
But there is a larger question here as well, Malli, because the thing is this, that we are going, I mean, from your point of view as a planner, you must have a, a sort of a foundation on which you can construct everything. So don't you as an agency hope that that foundation is a common foundation, whether the measurement is of digital, radio, print, or TV?
Yeah, so I think if I look at the baseline survey which BARC you're talking about and IRS, yeah, I mean in the past, for instance, let us say compared to IRS versus STAM, of course STAM did its own baseline and then IRS was there. Now, first is the hope that somewhere the numbers will not be that different because you're talking about the country as a whole. Of course, that is just maybe just blind idiotic hope, but that's quite, and that's the first hope that yeah, itna zyada difference nahi hai, plus or minus 5% hai, to we'll live with it.
At the all India
You know,
level, it will not be
at
different.
all India level, it will not be.
The
But
moment you
get-
parse the data,
correct.
you start getting
You
into
start
a problem.
getting into problems. Once you start cutting it, it's going to be a problem. So I agree. I mean, I think as a baseline, we need to have a common. It's like you need to have one single baseline ideally, so that we don't get into this. You don't get into messy conversions that actually IRS is saying this, but then I convert it back into BARC, and that's what it is supposed to mean. I mean, that's kind of pretty weird stuff to be talking about.
I'm the evangelist for this. So, this entire thing is a pretense. So, I got the answer I wanted. Anyway, Romil, how can BARC learn to work with other jigs? Because the thing is this, that, and that's the other question, which is also for the both of you, is that do we already have too many jigs? Do we need so many jigs? Do we need a jig of jigs? Yeah, and you know what? It's not unknown. I mean, there are other countries in which such things have in fact happened, that eventually they agreed that there are certain things that we need to get done, which are let's say the lowest common denominator of the work that we do. So, are we stuck in little ego boxes as an industry, or are we actually able, Romil, to reach out across the aisle and say that there are certain things where we need to work with everybody else as well?
Well, as I see it, actually, with BARC, at least the journey has begun in terms of in the right direction. It existed as far as since long with MRUC and IRS as well. And in terms of, I think, both the bodies, or if it's a jig of jigs or whatever, it needs to cooperate and talk more. I think that's the need of the hour, as you rightly said, just to make the entire ecosystem on the same base, right? The same taxonomy, as you call it, in terms of be it the digital, print, radio, TV, etc. So I think there needs to be, the need of the hour is really to have that one survey, which maybe not 300,000, maybe 600,000, you don't know the number, but in terms of which becomes the mother of the survey, which everyone relies on. And we are whether we are talking to the different jigs to make that happen, yes. Whether it will happen this year or next year, maybe not this year, but it will happen. Directionally, it is bound to happen. I think we are going in that direction. Now with common members being on both sides and having the agenda to drive this, I think it's likely to happen sooner.
Ankit, I think we are running out of time, but there is something which I have to raise now. And this has to do with who invests in all of this. These are all noble objectives. Everybody wants to understand behavior. Everybody wants to understand and measure behavior. And I have also had the fortune or misfortune of being a part of these bodies for the longest period of time. And the train sort of reaches a dead halt where it comes to figuring out how costs will get shared. And the same client community, which is extremely voluble and vociferous in its demand for more and more data, that's the point at which it says, but why should I be spending on this? Malli, your community also says that ultimately if this is the media guys' research, then why don't the media spend on it? And the media guys turn around and say that I'm creating inventory. You want to buy it. You are as much a member and participant in this particular value chain. So if we are to create a currency for it, we must all participate in the Reserve Bank that prints the currency. Why is it that only I'm doing it? So where does this sort of merry-go-round actually stop?
So as an advertiser, I think what happens is there is already a payment that we're making, right? There is a cost that we're incurring. So beyond that, it's a duplication of costs. Yeah, finally someone is making money out of this whole process. Yeah, so I'm not going to point fingers, but
So I have an answer to that, which is actually, the thing is that the client is anyway paying. I mean, the problem is it's just a cash flow problem rather than anything. Do you think the broadcaster, if he's paying for the research, he's not adding it back to the cost of the program that he's selling to the advertiser? He actually is. So I think, in fact, my opinion is that it would be much better if actually the client funds it first of all. Everything is funded by the client, because then there is the sense of unbiasedness in that is enhanced, because all said and done, if it is run by the broadcaster, the sense of it being truly unbiased doesn't go away. The second thing is that it decreases the scalability of a study, because let's assume for a moment that Bach wants to measure digital tomorrow. Now, it's not that it's not impossible, but then you'll have to bring in conflicting stakeholders of digital and TV when one clearly knows that the other ecosystem is going to steal money from it, and therefore how do you bring it in together is a more complex task. But on the other hand, if this had been funded by the client is media neutral. So actually, to my mind, the client should fund it. And yeah, agencies are poor people, will chip in.
all right. So point taken. Problem is historically it's been added back, as you said. Are broadcasters willing to roll back? Is the question.
I can't speak for them, but conceptually it's okay. Somebody has to put the money. It's a joint body, so somebody has to go and put the money to fund it, and it's a not-for-profit entity, right? I mean, he's best.
I think Ankit, the first and just to share in terms of just to get some, the first proposal from BARC as an industry body was to roll out CES. CES is a part of billing, right? So add just to the bills as far as 1% CES is concerned, and then let the end user, the system absorbs it, the overall ecosystem absorbs it. So it's transparent. You fairly know what is there. It's not those negotiations which used to happen. It's not the right thing to happen. I think being a joint industry body and having the objective to provide reliable measurement, and being a Section 8 company, which means a not-for-profit body, I think we are not in the business to make profits. We are in the business to make profits required for future cash flows, not in the business of distributing back. So, but that never happened. So I'm just saying, as a joint industry body, it doesn't matter for us who is paying. Our objective should be clear in what it needs to do, whether it needs to have 50,000 meters, 1 lakh meters, and somebody has to fund for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hello? Yeah. So the only problem with this construct is that historically this cost has been loaded into the broadcaster's cost. Now it's already formed a base. The broadcaster inflation is not going to change on that base. I'm saying, are the broadcasters even willing to budge for that 1%? So, yeah. Let's talk years here. Yeah, not CPRP. Yeah.
Okay, obviously this is hypothetical. I mean, this is a little bit of it goes into the, whether they will budge on the ER or not. It's in the hypothetical realm. But yeah, actually, I don't have an answer to that. I can't say anything without the data, but
I can take you up on that one.
You can say that it will.
No, so knowing broadcasters and our interactions with them so far, I don't think they're going to budge. Yeah, because if they've built it into their bottom lines, I think there's a projection, and fairly so. They have projections that they have to meet, and they will not want to budge from there. So it's a historical error that has happened now, unfortunately, but it's an error that we all have to live with.
I think the only reason why this is important, I feel, is because now with the change which is happening in the media landscape, we somewhere a shift it's like what happened in Sweden in the 80s. The whole of Europe was actually riding to the keeping to the right, and Sweden was the only one which was driving to the left. And because once they built the motorways across, then Sweden just realized that, man, I'm going to be completely out of place if I don't change. So they overnight changed it. Of course that was a painful process, I'm sure, and maybe quite a few accidents happened and some pain was there, but it was a pain that had to be endured. So maybe this is the only answer I have to this is maybe this 1% is a pain we endure for a greater good, which will follow, going forward.
Okay, I think we over here can go on. We all love to hear the sounds of our own voices, but I had said that there is no proscenium, there is no dark and light bit. Strangely enough, nobody has said anything, so, might as well get some of you talking, yeah?
Well, actually, I've got something. last time you talked about the need to know and the nice. It's nice to know and the need to know. And now you're talking. When what's the difference between sample and census? Now, I want to say once technology goes forward and as time goes forward, I'm sure there'll be capability wherein you're going to be able to study the behavior and get data for a very large, including the entire population. Wouldn't that have a lot of applications and actually make life simpler?
I'm going to layer this into a question for Ankit and for Malli, which is, this is the kind of thing which also raises serious questions of privacy. Already, advertisers and digital platforms are under enormous amount of attack. I mean, for violating that sort of unstated contract of confidentiality with the consumer of digital content. This kind of a thing leads us straight down that extremely dangerous path. So, on the other hand, the temptations are very, very strong. So, where do we all come out of this?
Okay, let's put it this way. I think we're all consumers first and advertisers, broadcasters, researchers later. And what we do for the consumer also applies for us. So honestly, I don't think you want to go down that route. However nice that data might be to know. But beyond a point, we'll all have to take a hard call on how much is enough. Yeah. And the day you start crossing that line is when all kinds of disasters start happening. Yeah. So technology might exist. I think it already does, especially for digital. But somewhere one has to put a full stop. Yeah.
Do you hear what they're saying? Malli, I think you.
No, my opinion is divided. I'll tell you, honestly, because yes, in digital we've already walked down that road. I mean, I think unless something dramatic happens, it's not going to roll back. Because today the truth of the matter for me is that Facebook knows a lot more about me than what I know about myself. My own interesting narrative about myself is actually not the truth. Facebook knows the truth better than my self-narrative. So anyway, that's already happened. I mean, the paste is out of the tube, so I can't put it back in. Very unlikely. So therefore, I mean, I think if there are ways, of course, the ethical question is really large. I mean, I think with all the stuff that has been happening over the last 2 to 3 years, data, privacy and ethics, and including some of the most recent events, which are Ashley Madison and whatever else that's happened in the last 2 months, I think the whole question of data ethics is going to be there. But to me, for lack of a better phrase, this is the realm of quote-unquote terrible phrase, but big data. But there is some seriously interesting stuff that can happen. I mean, the kind of stuff that, it can take consumer insight into an absolutely the next level. What I think of it as scaled intuition. Because today I think, when I want to understand a consumer, I do a focus group of 8 and I throw that number. But big data at an individual level takes me to a scaled level of intuition, A. And B, because digital is addressable as a medium. Because I reach out to the individual consumer and I do not reach to the aggregate. I just think that maybe somewhere down the line, the road is not immediate. The privacy laws are very tricky. No doubt about that. Maybe, but that's a road that measurement will have to cross at some point of time, where maybe it makes the transition from the first point which you made, which is maybe it would never be from sample to the census, but maybe from sample to the point where we liberate ourselves from the tyranny of relative error. I mean,
Whoa. Tyranny of relative error. I love that phrase. I shall use it. Yes, Minority Report. This is Minority Report. This is true. Bit scary, that.
Yeah, it is, but it's already happening.
And at that point of time, all the data is available. The question is that is everyone going to be plugged in?
Yeah. No, and the thing is that one of the issues that we raised earlier was about integrity, and so the thing is that so long as intentions are bona fide, but how do you know they are? By the way, another little GK question. I hope everybody knows Ashley Madison here. Or are you all too young and you're still in the timber stage and you don't really need Ashley Madison? Huh? Only a handful of us. Okay, there's a hand back there, did I see? Yeah, go for it. Oh, No, I thought you'd registered on it. So you have no questions about your own listing then? Okay, then it's all right. Okay, anything else? Any other thoughts, comments? Yeah, there you go.
You spoke about media biases, specifically over television. So how would that be true for digital as well? Because digital, like you said, is changing so much, but there's so much of data. But how much are the agencies or are the people who are buying and selling media, would say, different from those of television when it comes to media biases?
Actually, yeah. I mean, digital is one area where we do have a lot of data, but I think if I go back to the practice today, I don't know if we still are actually using all of that adequately. The truthful answer to that is probably no. And I think I would just go back to one of the lacuna, I think, which we still have, which we face as an industry is cross-media, measurement. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say I would put digital a notch better. Especially when I look down it in terms of performance, digital, which is search-driven, digital planning, the SEM and whatever. So there, obviously, the use of data is very much there. But I think in terms of display and video and so on and so forth, a few notches better, but still a long way to go.
The lady there, spectacle lady, yeah.
My question actually is regarding audience measurement tools. Now, we see that TV is...
To whom are you addressing?
I think it's to Mr. Romil, but anybody...
Romil, there you go.
Anybody is free to answer. Now, TV is expanding into the mobile platform. We know there's applications like Hotstar and all. And I believe Hotstar is owned by Star TV itself. So, if they are to give any audience measurements, there's bound to be some sort of questions as to the honesty and the transparency that's involved. So now does BARC or the industry in general have any kind of discussion on the need to measure this kind of metrics and what plans might there be?
Okay, so when we started this BARC journey, so we wanted to choose a technology that measures all, right? So we wanted to be platform agnostic from day one when we went to choose the technology. So television is just one more medium in terms of it's also being distributed via DTH, via analog cable, via digital cable, via IPTV, etc. So similar is mobile device is another platform and tablet is another platform. So the technology that we have chosen to do TV measurement enables us to move seamlessly to mobile measurement and tablet measurement as well. Whether we have enabled it right now, we have not. In terms of our focus in the first pass has been really to focus and get the TV piece right and TV piece out, and then focus on the digital measurement piece as well. But whether we have started to work on that, yes, we have. But whether we're going to launch it sometime in the next 6 months, maybe not. So our internal target is hopefully by the end of next year is what we should have something going on the digital measurement piece. But the key point really is that the technology that we have chosen enables us to measure Hotstar or Ditto or any other content platform as it is.
Thank you.
Last question. The lady in white.
So this is actually from a very academic point of view, and nothing with respect to the panel. But as media students, we are expected to learn these tools and operate them before we enter the industry. The problem that happens is we really don't get licenses that easily. So is there a system that we could actually incorporate where we get these licenses for student operations so that work in colleges can be...
Yeah, that's lovely. This is lobbying in the middle of an event. See, listen, there is actually, here's how you should position this. You should position this slightly differently. If you are going to be the people who are going to work the systems when you go become practitioners, then it is important that you have access to them. I mean, one of the things that people like, say, Bloomberg do or Dow Jones do is that they actually distribute terminals to business schools so that if you want to be a trader in the financial markets, you've already used the Bloomberg terminal, so you know how it works. So it is to some extent a way of attempting to explain self-interest to the industry bodies. And you have an industry body representative over here, so I will now guide it to him.
Another one there also.
Oh, he's only a moderator. This one is only a moderator. He doesn't know anything about anything.
The point I think...
No, well made. The point is well made. But I think maybe, Romil, you have a point, a thought.
We need institutional rate,
Yeah, I think. How much were you paid for that question? Sit. Anyway, Romil, you want to answer that?
No, I think I agree to that, Chandan, in terms of obviously as being, and since these are the future leaders and they are going to be future leaders, so it's important that, and it's good for all the system, be it IRS, BMW, or be it any other digital measurement system or anything in terms of to kind of imbibe, and it kind of acts as a exercise which is good for all the bodies. So for them as well, for you guys, for educational institutions as well. So we'll work towards that in terms of there's a thought process there, and we'll work towards that. Absolutely.
Gentleman in blue.
So there is a concept called electrophyllography, which was coined in 1965 or 70. Okay, so the concept actually tracks the eyeballs of a person. So my question is, can such a technology can be integrated with the content of a media so that the eyeballs can be tracked and we can get to know of how a particular content is working throughout the population rather than on a particular sample. So I want to know what's the future.
Said the man who has never seen porn in his life. Hey, no. In all earnest, it can be done. But not the way that you want it to be done.
If I may add, in terms of the technologies like that has actually been kind of tested in a lot of other countries, be it eyeballs or be it facial recognition or be it heat sensing or be it these are extremely expensive techniques to use, and hence makes cost of research prohibitive and lends itself to be economically worse to actually apply and from a practicality standpoint. And hence we still kind of use the remote based recognition for an individual presence in the room, unfortunately till date in all the countries that do meter based measurement.
Well, thank you very much. You've been patient. And thank you very much, panel, for being wonderful.
I would now like to call Professor Dr. Ashwini Upadhyay to felicitate the judges, please.
And a very special thanks to Chandan for coming in spite of the injury. Fantastic.
I now have the results of the media competition with me, and we are giving away two prizes. The runner-up team gets a cash prize of ₹3,000, and the team that comes first gets a cash prize of ₹5,000. And I'll start by announcing the runner. And I would like to ask Professor Chatterjee to give the prize away to the teams. There are two prizes only. The runner-up team is Media Minions. They win a cash prize of ₹3,000. And the winning team is Team Transit. Congratulations. Thank you.